Hey guys, this is Production Music Live with another video. This afternoon I was working on a new project inspired by going to the club yesterday and listening to some underground Berlin style techno melodic kind of music. I sat down and put some ideas into an Ableton project, and I thought I could just record the screen while working a little bit on it. So we are working with the sidechain as always, kick sample, kick position in the MIDI file. And I'm also loading in a kick sample over here on this track that we just loop. Well, let's loop this section here. So let's solo the kick. It's a simple kick, always on C3 if you use a simpler device for your kicks. It's the second kick out of the premium over here. That one sounds pretty cool always. And I'm also using a tom kind of sound over here. And it's another sample. You can use any tom sample, but I think this one sounds pretty cool. Cutting out a little bit over here and also adding a little bit of chorus to put it to the sides a little more. The kick is also cut out here. It snaps a little more if you cut those frequencies out. Sounds harder and not really bouncy without the EQ. So I kind of prefer that one. And over here there's this undergroundy snare kind of thing. It's a percussive element. Wet. A little bit transposition going on, focused on those frequencies over here and put a chorus on top. And now we have this undergroundy techno kind of beat. I don't know, yesterday I was in a club here in Berlin and they played a lot of those kind of tracks, and I thought, let's do something this afternoon. Well, I kind of wanted to put a gliding bass in there, so let's listen to this one. And that bass is produced with Massive. And I think I started with one of our Massive presets out of the Future Bass preset pack. And I used the gliding sign. And I think I tweaked it a little bit because the gliding sign doesn't have the third oscillator. And it also doesn't have any modulation. So that's how it sounds without. It's not the right sound for this kind of track over here, so I wanted to have it a little wider. Let's just put on the kick and the bass. And let's tweak a little bit around. So you see I use this escalation 1 wavetable and using the bend minus plus because it kind of sounds nicer with this shaping. If we use the spectrum, little bit of this powerful higher frequent effect. So I'm keeping down the amp a little more. And now I'm putting some modulation on top, a little bit of ring modulation, phase just a tad, position slightly, just to change the sound a little more. And without the chorus. It's a little more centered without the chorus. I prefer it that way. So we could also put a filter on top, send it all to filter 1, and use, for example, low pass filter. Mix it to filter 1. Now we hear nothing, that's right, because the filter is off. And this kind of stuff should sound nice with a DAF filter. Okay, context. So now in the context it doesn't really cut through, so let's open it up more. Yeah, I would leave it that way. I kind of like it that way. What else is there? We have another instance of Massive playing those notes over here. Da 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 da. Just a sine wave over here, saw wave over there, less amplification on that one, and a little bit of a grain. Yeah, and over here there's this funny little effect on this tal sound, which is out of this tal synthesizer. It's also a pad sound. I kind of like that synthesizer a lot, but you could also achieve this kind of sound with Massive, or quite similar at least. On that one, there's a sidechain compressor, there's a little bit of chorus, not using the Pro Q over here. There's a little bit of reverb, auto filter not used. And what's interesting, I can actually delete this, is this frequency shifter over here. It kind of adds a nice effect. So this pad is actually playing this sound. just before this drop over here, shifting down the fine pitching of the frequencies over here to kind of drop in harder afterwards. And you see I'm stopping at this bar over here because I want to have space for this bass effect over here, this glide up bass kind of sound, which is also volume adjusted. So you see the utility over here, volume is taken down a bit, and I just drop it in right after this pitch down effect that comes in this area over here. We are loading in the bass. I'm not totally satisfied yet with it, but it's already an idea of how this drop could work. Kind of needed a little more powerful, I think. Anyways, I'm introducing a ride over here. Kind of like this ride, making those rhythms. And also, I'm a big fan of those mini drops, so sometimes just take out everything and load in the bass just before the next bar. Yeah, and on this sound we have a chorus, an auto filter, which actually does the job over here of the filter. To have this upsweeping effect, and we are playing the wide bass massive preset, also from the Future Bass massive preset pack. That one has a tube, chorus, pulse wave, and a little bit of a square wave over here. And you see towards this so-called real drop, I'm actually putting an auto filter on the master, and I'm using it as a low cut, cutting off some lows towards this drop to have this moving effect. And now another bass sound is introduced. I'm combining a sub bass over here, which is basically a sine wave with, well, sort of LFO bass, and the sub bass just playing those notes. Nothing really fancy. We have a sine wave over here and just a little bit of a mixture of a square and a sol wave. And on this other track over here, we have a LFO kind of bass, which has a bit of saturation in the end, chorus applied, a little bit of EQing out of the lows, and another EQ here in this area. There were some resonances over there, and let's have a look at the preset over here. This one is actually from a Tropical House pack, and we're using a square to sol wave over here. The LFO is following a 2/12 ratio. So and you see over here, it's stopping, and I'm using another instance of this bass LFO because I want to have the rhythm of the LFO slightly different here. So let's look back into the LFO, and you see it's 3/16 over here. So we're getting a little bit of diversion in the rhythm. And over here it's getting pretty full, but this is like the peak region of the track, and I'm putting in those ARP kind of sounds. They have heavy pitching on top, so the first envelope is doing this 64 notes pitcher, so that puts in this attacky feel. Sounds kind of cool. There's one part that I'm really not happy with right now. That's this break part over here. This break part is always a little bit difficult because you need to reduce and also take out most of your drumming, and you need a pretty good idea. And I don't like my idea so far, the one I'm using right now. So let's go in there, check this. Well, you can see here that in order to introduce the break, I'm kind of transposing and pitching down the right sample. Transposition is being automated down, so you get this sliding down effect from the right sound. I don't know, it's not the thing I want to do over here. So let's have a look at the notes first. And we're playing another patch from the Future Bass pack. It's called Whirly, like a Wurlitzer. And we have saw, square, modulation of the filter FM, a little bit of bright noise, a little bit of LFO, on the oscillators 1 and 2 to have it a little bit vibrant. I think I'm going to apply some changes over here. That's kind of cool. Going to emphasize those two. Only going to use those parts. I'm going to make it a little more natural. Okay, that's kind of nice. Let's consolidate that scene and group it. A little later, so it sounds more natural, a little bit of like 35 maybe. So this is the track delay. I'm delaying this track compared to the other ones right now. Well, actually we could kind of do this a little later still. How about this? That's better. Okay, now we need to move up with the frequency of the filter here as well, because else it sounds a little too powerful. And I'll kind of go down right before the drop of the kick, something like this. Okay, and now we can play around with the sound. So compared to the other sounds, the white noise is too loud if we have the filter open. Let's open it up towards the drop. Yeah, that's kind of cool. the delay of this massive over here is messing up this pitch down effect. So let's quickly drag in the utility and cut them out here. Anyways, I think that's enough for today. Still need to work on this one. Not too happy with it now, it's okay. I don't know, there needs to be something in this area. It takes too long to really hit off here. And also the break needs a little more work, maybe a vocal sample or something. I hope you enjoyed looking over my shoulder this afternoon, and subscribe to our channel for other tutorials, and I hope to see you next time.